Good morning, fight fan! You know what time it is. You know what time it is. We've got UFC on ESPN 1 in the Valley of the Sun, Phoenix, Arizona. Looks like we got 13 bouts. Excellent card. One thing to watch out for, though, was we did have 3 fighters who missed weight last night, as well as something else to look out for. 9 out of these 13 fights are expected to go the distance. So we will kick off the card here. Mike's MMA Picks with a quick card fight morning breakdown for you. Looking to get this done in about 20 to 25 minutes. First fight on the card, we have women's 115-pound division. We've got Emily Whitmire against Alexandra Albu. Alexandra Albu hasn't been in the cage in a couple of years. We know she's into CrossFit. She's Russian. She's got big power, but her fight IQ is suspect. 8,600 on Draftkings. Going to be taking on Emily Whitmire. Emily Whitmire at 7,600. The odds have closed dramatically on this fight. We are almost at a pick'em. Whitmire, 27 years old, roughed up Jamie Moyle in her last fight, fighting out of Extreme Couture. This fight should go the distance. It's sitting at -195 right now. I got to lean Albu in this spot. Emily Whitmire, despite her win over Moyle, has shown some deficiencies in her game, but should be a decent scrap that goes the distance. So look out for that value from a DraftKings perspective with Whitmire. Next up, we've got Battle of the Suspect Fight IQs in Luke Saunders against Henan Barao. Henan Barao, I tweeted this out earlier in the week, 32-1 at one point, and rattles off a number of losses in a row. Barao seems to come out hot in the first round, and then tails off and gets basically taken advantage of in the end of the fight. He has 3 consecutive losses against Ewell, Kelleher, and Aljamain Sterling. Luke Sanders, we know he's dabbled in a bunch of different extracurricular activities through the years. And he grew up as a BMX bike rider, played a number of sports, great athlete, but even when he's winning fights, he makes bonehead decisions. Got caught against Ronnie Yaya. We saw his fight against Alcantara, where he was completely dismantling Alcantara on the feet, and I believe got caught in a knee bar in that fight. And then I believe Andre Sukumta had his number as well. So tough fight to call. I think Barao at 7,500, we'll see him as a popular play on DraftKings, but he missed weight again. It makes me wonder how he continues to get fights at bantamweight. It's a little ridiculous at this point. I don't trust Luke Sanders at -185, though. This is more of a GPP play from my perspective. Man, it's either Barao early or Sanders late. That's my take on this fight. Next up, we have the oldest fighter on the card, Jessica Penne, is going to be taking on Jodie Escobar. Jodie Escobar comes in with a 6-4 record. She's sitting at +120 right now, 7,800 on DraftKings. I don't know how people can trust Jodie Escobar. She dropped the ball in her last fight. Jessica Penne has a little bit different look to her these days. I know she's taken a bunch of beatings in the past, but I don't think Escobar is going to be the one to do it. looking to see what kind of output Penne has for 8,400 on DraftKings. This fight, I mean, look, it's expected to go to a decision, minus 312. It's I think Penne rolls here, but it's not going to be a very active fight, and one I will be primarily avoiding on DraftKings. So next up, we have another closely lined fight with Scott Holtzman against our buddy Nick Lentz. Nick Lentz, 34 years old. He's looked better since switching camps. We saw what he did to Gray Maynard last time out. Nick Lentz's stand-up is looking much better. We know he does have that guillotine that he can fall back on if Holtzman takes the fight to the ground, which I suspect he will. Lentz coming in at 7,700. Holtzman, man, was it Alan Patrick that he totally dismantled in his last fight? Holtzman, I'm speaking of. That was a very impressive performance. Seemed to have turned the corner recently. He's another fighter who's had a baby recently, and you see what that does to fighters. Some folks have a narrative that having a child is a detriment, but then other people, it tends to motivate them. And obviously, it's clear that Holtzman has been motivated by the birth of his child. This fight is expected to go the distance at minus 260. Lentz, he's had a bit of a career resurgence. Holtzman, 35 years old. He doesn't have much of a submission game. I see this fight going the distance. I'm leaning Holtzman here, but Lentz, I've learned to never underestimate Nick Lentz. I'll say that. Next up, we have KGB Andrea Lee at 8,900 on DraftKings in the 125-pound women's division, taking on Ashley Evans-Smith, who comes in as a plus 155 underdog. Ashley Evans-Smith, 31 years old, 7,300 as far as a DraftKings price goes. This fight is also expected to go to a decision. The odds on that are sitting at minus 180 right now. I think Lee is going to be a little too much for Smith. I think her activity is going to help her out. I will say that Evan Smith did look a little bit better on the scales than she has in the past. For 8,900, we'll see. I think we're going to see a lot of folks on Gracie, a lot of folks on Calvillo, and at 8,900, I mean, look at this fight, the odds to go to a decision compared to the other women's fights. This is pretty close, so Lee might be a good play in DraftKings. Now, we're moving up to the next fight, which is at 135 pounds. Well, it was supposed to be, but Manny Bermudez came in at 140 pounds, right? Manny Bermudez taking on Benito Lopez. Benito Lopez fighting out of Team Alpha Male, 24 years of age. He's a bit of a wild man. Benito Lopez odds have dropped significantly on this fight. He's down to plus 165. Benito Lopez also is you're scraping the bottom of the barrel when it comes to salaries. He comes in at 7,100. Manny Bermudez comes in at 9,100. So look at fight doesn't go to a decision is at minus 285 right now. We know Manny Bermudez, the way he gets this done is by submission, probably early, if he wins this fight. But one has to wonder what the weight cut has done for him. He seems like a stand-up guy, somebody that wouldn't miss weight on purpose to gain an advantage here. Not like my friend Michelle Perceres. Benito Lopez in my eyes is a live dog here. The only problem is this fight isn't expected to go to a decision, so you're really going out on a limb by rostering Lopez. He could get smoked out quickly with the submission and then put up 5 points. But he could come out and land many strikes and get Bermudez out of there, because we saw the fight against Morales where Bermudez, his deficiency is stand-up, and that's where Lopez shines. The only problem is I've seen Lopez put himself in situations where he could get his back taken, and you know what that means. So I actually am going to pick Lopez to score the upset in this fight, but we'll see what happens. Next up, I will say, though, it's probably a good idea to have a healthy amount of Manny Bermudez out there as well, because if he gets the submission in GPPs, he may be on the optimal lineup. Next up, we have Jimmy Rivera against Aljamain Sterling. Jimmy Rivera comes in with a 22-2 record, sits as a minus 140 favorite, 29 years old, fighting out of Tiger Schulman's. We know who Jimmy Rivera is, $8,300 on DraftKings. Likes to get in, likes to get out. Great striking, short arms, lower center of gravity. Aljamain Sterling, 29 years old, plus 130 underdog, 16-3 record, 7,900 on DraftKings. This fight is expected to go to a decision, sitting at minus 275 right now. Sterling's been on a roll lately. Both of these guys lost to Moraes. Something that concerns me about Jimmy Rivera is late in fights, he tends to, I don't want to say totally gas out, because he does cross the finish line, but his output wanes, and he looks like he's starting to run out of gas. I expect a lot of folks to avoid this fight on DraftKings, because for a men's fight to go to a decision, minus 275, that's a little wide. I actually like Sterling in this spot. I know he's a low output fighter, but at some point during this fight, I expect Ray Longo and Matt Serra's game plan to rise to the surface, and somehow, some way, they get this fight to the ground. But we'll see if that ends up playing out. But I do like Sterling in this spot. I think Sterling, he learned his lesson after the Moraes fight. He got caught with that knee, So we'll see what happens in this fight. Jimmy Rivera, though, you never sleep on Jimmy Rivera. Next fight, big fight, 145-pound division. We've got Andre Fili against Miles Jury. Andre Fili has looked great lately, even despite losing a fight to Michael Johnson, and then I actually had him losing the fight to Dennis Bermudez. But he's worked offensive wrestling into his game. He also seems to have shored up some of his defense. Has pretty high output, at least on the feet. He's 7,400 on DraftKings, 28 years old, taking on Team Alpha Male. Oh, no, Andre Fili's Team Alpha Male, taking on Alliance MMA's Miles Jury. Miles Jury at minus 140, 30 years old, 8,800 on DraftKings. Miles Jury, we saw in his recent bout against Chad Mendes, got TKO'd pretty quickly. In the fight with Rick Glenn, he was counter-punching throughout the fight and did look solid on the ground. I have a few questions here. I'm wondering how Andre Fili is going to I wonder how Miles Jury is going to react to Andre Fili's aggressive approach. It seems like Fili's got to know that Jury is the counterpuncher here, and that his game is tight. It's funny. This fight is expected to go to a decision at minus 250. I see Team Alpha Male fighters traditionally have trouble when they're on their backs, and they're used to being on top in their fights. I don't like to make generalizations, but most folks out there are expecting a stand-up lackluster fight with Andre Fili winning a decision here. I just caution folks to not sleep on Miles Jury. Miles Jury is the more technical striker. We haven't heard a peep out of him. That's another thing that I'm interested in. No one interviewed him, as far as I'm aware of, on media day. And this fight, I think we are going to. Oh, hang on. Yeah, hang on, buddy. I'll see you in a few. I'm leaning Miles Jury in this spot. I think that he's going to be a sneaky play, and I understand. I'm actually, when I'm watching lineup block, I think we'll see anywhere between 25 and 35% ownership of Fili, possibly even a bit higher. So Jury might be a good play here. The other thing is Jury does have some finishes to his game. I know Fili hasn't been finished that often, but Miles Jury does possess the skills to end the fight. So we'll see. I did see Miles Jury inside the distance, was hovering around plus 350-ish. So I'm scoping that fight out. But odds makers have the fight open, I believe, at minus 195-ish for Miles Jury, and it's come down dramatically. So there's something to be said about that as well. You got to try to find an edge anywhere in DraftKings. So take a look at that fight. Next up, we have Brian Barberena against Vicente Luque. Vicente Luque, 14-6 records. It's amazing that he has 6 losses, considering how great of a fighter he is. And Barberena, 14-5 record. Barberena plus 370. 6,800 on DraftKings. Barberena is one of the kings of the grind here. Usually gets his ass kicked early in fights and then survives, and wily vet grinds out a decision. I don't see that this time around. Luque, he's an assassin in there. 9,400, highest price play on DraftKings, but I think he's probably going to pay it off. Fight doesn't go the distance at minus 150 right now. Both of these guys are fairly respectful fighters. I think Luque is his precision striking is going to be too much for Barberena, who fights out of the MMA lab. Barberena, I believe last time we saw him out was when he ended Jake Ellenberger's career. He's also Barberena. One thing to consider too is that he's fighting on home turf here. So this, I think Luque is going to finish this fight on the feet in the first round. Next up, we've got Alex Caceres against Kron Gracie. Kron Gracie, 30 years old, minus 280 favorite. We know that he's been winning on the Japanese MMA scene. Let's see if that translates to the UFC on home soil. Alex Caceres, it's amazing. He's at 25 fights, only 30 years old, plus 255 underdog. Caceres, 6,900 on DraftKings. Kron Gracie, 9,300. This fight is not expected to go the distance. In fact, it's the second highest odds to not go the distance. It's at minus 300. So Kron Gracie's going to have Nate Diaz in his corner. I want to see a few minutes of his stand-up. People who roster him want him to get the fight to the ground immediately and then rack up some grappling points that way. But from my perspective, just as a fan of the sport, I want to see how his stand-up game has evolved over the past few years. 30 years old with a 4-0 mixed martial arts record. We know a lot of his time outside of the cage has been spent grappling. So I do expect Gracie to roll here. The question is he going to lock up a submission quickly, or is he going to play with his prey and transition and rack up those grappling points and takedowns that we need. Also, I'm interested to see how he's going to take the fight to the ground. Is he going to pull guard? Is he going to use his stand-up to close distance and then get his takedown? So we'll see what happens there. Next up, probably one of the heaviest owned fighters on the card. We've got Cynthia Calvillo taking on Courtney Casey. Courtney Casey also fighting out of Arizona. She is this is Casey. She's a plus 295 underdog, 31 years old, $7,000 on DraftKings. This fight is expected to go to a decision, though it was the line was much wider earlier in the week, and it has closed significantly. Calvillo 9,200. I've seen statistics out there regarding Courtney Casey's takedown defense at 24%. A concern of mine is Courtney Casey's a very large 115-pound fighter. She also possesses a legitimate ground game herself. So when Calvillo gets this fight to the ground, we may see some interesting grappling exchanges. Especially, I'm expecting reversals in this bout. I'm rolling with Calvillo here. I'm trying to think. If Casey wins this fight, does she win it by submission or does she win it by a striking-based decision? I think if Casey, her path to victory is probably going to be a striking-based decision. But my pick is going to be Calvillo by submission. Her inside the distance odds at one point, Calvillo's was plus 185, and they have since closed a bit. So the pick is Calvillo by sub. Next up, we have the co-main event of the evening. Paul Felder at 155 pounds taking on James Vick. Both guys made weight here. Paul Felder, it's interesting. Excellent performance despite the loss against Mike Perry. Showed tremendous composure against Charles Oliveira, getting out of those submission attempts. But something that also struck me was how easily Oliveira was able to get that fight to the ground. Felder, in an interview recently, spoke very highly of Oliveira's strength, and that I was a little shocked about that. So I want to see what Felder looks like back at 155. Felder, we know exactly who he is, the Irish Dragon at 8,200. And then we have James Vick, who got his head taken off against Justin Gaethje in his last fight. I faded James Vick, and it's actually cost me money on previous fights, but I did have Gaethje in his last fight. I wonder, with Vick, he's going to really have to keep this fight at distance, and then when and if Felder fades, which I don't think Felder is going to fade. I think that he has so much motivation going for this that we saw he kept coming forward in the Perry fight, despite the broken arm, and despite it was clear he was losing on the scorecards, but he was not going away. I don't expect Felder to go away in this fight. But Vic is a savvy vet. He's only lost 2 fights in his career, to Dariush and then also Gaethje. Vic, I don't know if with the Gaethje fight, he was having a lot of success kicking early, especially kicking to the body of Gaethje. So I expect Vic to stay at distance. Whenever Felder closes, he'll try to use those knees. If the fight does hit the ground, Vic has some deceptively long legs and arms. Maybe they're not deceptive because they are very long. But my pick here is James Vick. I think that he's going to be able to. I think he's going to have success the longer the fight goes, and he'll be able to. His volume is going to be an issue for Felder. The only problem is this is such a closely lined fight. The only problem I have with Vic is if Felder decides to just lunge inside and basically he's going to have to put himself in danger to do this. But once he does get inside, we know that Vic has tall man defense and he's there to be hit. So I think the line's correct, that it is a pick 'em at this stage in the game. So I expect higher ownership of Vic at 8,000 in DraftKings, which leads Paul Felder to be a solid play at 8,200. But it's hard for me not to just put aside the skill set and the facts. So I'm leaning Vic. Next up, we have the main event of the evening. Something everyone will be tuning in for. The former Arizona State Sun Devil alumni, Cain Velasquez, with a 14-2 record, coming off of the back surgeries, knee issues. He's going to be taking on Francis Ngannou. Everybody knows what's at stake here. Ngannou at 7,200 in DraftKings. I expect to see a tremendous amount of Ngannou out there. It's a dangerous play. Both to pick one side of this fight is dangerous because if you're on the wrong side, you're probably going to get just a few points. Velasquez at 9,000 on DraftKings. I think he is a good play, but he's risky. You're going to be putting your neck out there. Ngannou, 32 years old, came in at, I believe, 258 pounds. He's just looks like he's sculpted. Velasquez's head movement better be on point for this fight. His open workouts, it was hard to derive any helpful information from that. He worked up a sweat, basically. If you take solace in the fact that Daniel Cormier, his teammate, has spoken very highly of him, that's helpful. Velasquez got down to, I believe, minus 150 or 155 on the betting line. Now he's back up to minus 170 or 175. It's a dangerous play, but I lean Cain in this spot. The longer the fight goes, this will be Cain's fight. If Francis comes out and ends this in the first minute, I would not be surprised one bit. Fight doesn't go the distance is at minus 700 here, so you should get in on this fight one way or the other. Well, I retract that statement. I will say that one of these fighters should be on the optimal lineup. I'm expecting. Actually, I'm curious to see what kind of ownership Velasquez has. I know he's got a name to him. He's known as one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, but I'd like to see him come back and win in dominant fashion here, similar to what Stipe did. But the other thing is Stipe, when you go back and look at that fight, he had to absorb some strikes. He took some damage and played a very dangerous game with Ngannou on the feet for the beginning of every round, of all 5 rounds, even in the 3rd round, even though Ngannou was gassed, those were still heavy punches coming at Stipe. So I know in the 4th round and 5th round, there will be hardly anything on them, but I'm going to pick Kane here, and I hope he does it in front of his home crowd. I'd like to see a nice passing of the torch between Cormier and Velasquez. We'll see. That's why they make the fights, right? All right, folks. I'm at 30 minutes here, 31 minutes. I want to wish everybody a great Sunday evening. Mike's MMA Picks going to be signing off here. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm also at betmma.tips as well as CapperTech. Good luck in your contests and enjoy the fights. Take care.